The cult of Saturn, derivative of Roman history or AI slop? Why not both? And just following up on the Watchers reading, near the end there, we had that group dynamic that was kind of culty in nature. Doesn't necessarily mean that they have to actually be having meetings, but it's more following the mechanics and dynamics of that, the unquestionable leader, the direct line to God, there is one way, that is the only way, no negotiation, things like that, very authoritarian. Um, but any good secret society needs symbols. And Cult of Saturn is the first thing that came to mind when I saw Karmic Path and Talisman in reverse. Because I've seen this idea of the black cube of Saturn, but not really much to substantiate it. That doesn't necessarily mean there aren't people um, misappropriating, Saturn from Roman mythology, and people will do that, just like cherry pick ideas, and if they themselves and as an individual, wow, got a really strong ring in my left ear that surprised me. But if they themselves as an individual are in a distorted state, let's say, they can easily become ungrounded and unbalanced, and then they might just take whatever ideas they can latch onto from any pantheon and use that to justify whatever it is they're doing. Um, you see that a lot in the way people talk about voodoo and hoodoo, as if those practices in and of themselves are evil. They're not. Source, Irish descendant. And I appreciate that I'm Ellis Island Irish and not Sugar Plantation Irish, but I really don't see the difference in commenting on the matter. But people will just take things they see in Hollywood, or they've got one nugget of information with no context, and just kind of run with it. So we'll start getting some cards here. I've got the Illuminati Oracle. Let's see. What about the Cult of Saturn? And it does track the last reading, the little shorter one, quite well with Sachiel, the Angel of Coin. Because that idea of this Cult of Saturn, they just kind of loosely follow things that Saturn or Kronos might represent, power, money, discipline, karma, things like that. But it's very nebulous. We've got change of power. Authority is changing hands, yet power rarely shifts without resistance. Expect turbulence as one influence gives way to another. This is a pivotal moment. That's interesting. And you've got kind of, these look like church pews, and then almost some Greek looking buildings, and that looks like a Capitol building. So separation of church and state is what's coming to mind. But maybe some sort of just came to mind, Frostpunk. If you've ever played that game, there was like two separate paths you could go down. In the first one, like how you would rule, it was either by the rule of law or through the church. It was like one or the other. And so whatever previous structure was in place, something getting revealed about it? What's the tea? What about this change of power? What do we need to know? Dirty offer, love on the brain, lost in fantasy, can't stop thinking of them, love that never left, and running in reverse. And there's that twin flame idea again, like the chasing twin flames cult that I brought up in the last one. That this would be like the chaser and not the runner. Dirty offer and love on the brain. It's giving me those same like scammy vibes. To try and prevent a change of power? Maybe? I need a little bit more. Because I'm not clear as to, like, why the dirty offer? I don't like how those hands look. Yeah, I'll take all those. Caught a case. STD, rash, etc. Boss daddy, stable, rich, business owner, CEO, big D energy, divination abuser. This is looking culty. And no facts. All vibes, no receipts, talking nonsense, messy storyteller. But that's in reverse. Oh, the change of power is going to reveal something like this. Like some sordid backstory. And I do want to comment, since this STD card came out. You know, there are a lot of tarot readers that the way I hear them talk about people with STDs is really not cool. It brings to mind, there was a woman that I used to hang out with when I was younger in a trailer park I used to haunt. And she would let me hang out on her porch when I was underage to drink my energy drinks and smoke my cigarettes, you know, just in peace, like not have anybody bothering me because I wasn't bothering anybody, right? And things were kind of tense one day between her and her husband, and he stormed off, whatnot, and as soon as he left, she broke down in tears. And I got all this backstory that I didn't have previously, that, you know, she had stopped working to support him, or there was something going on. I don't know if it was like a disability thing. But she wasn't working and he was struggling with addiction issues, I think alcohol, and had cheated on her and contracted herpes and passed it on to her. And I just can't help but remember that story when I hear other readers talk about, you know, people living with STDs. Like, it's just so distasteful, you know? And some of these readers are parents. Like, if your kid knows about your channel, they're going to hear the way you talk about people that are in circumstances that you don't know the context for. And I mean, why would you look down on somebody for having a health issue? You know, it's one thing if they're, you know, cheating on people, not being safe, not disclosing, you know, things like that, but just like simply looking down on someone for the fact that they have that, it just, you don't know what happened. And so I wonder, I don't know, this weird dirty offer. is this someone who doesn't disclose? Because that would be a threat to the perception, you know? And if we're going on that perception theme, maybe this is someone who doesn't want people to know they use divination. You know, it is giving like culty, where during the day, it's all business, you know? Like your average white button-down shirt and a tie kind of office working sort of job, but then by night they're doing all sorts of things that end up harming other people, and they're not the ones that end up suffering like the social consequences for it. It's the person that like got cheated on, you know, that got betrayed. So there's some sort of connection with like, are they trying to tie themselves to you through some sort of, I don't know, either a contraction of something or like reproductive coercion? Because people will do anything to protect their reputation, you know? But on the left here, what is going on with this change of power? Ooh, healer. Changing over to a more heart-centered approach, maybe? Because I feel like a lot of people don't want to stand up for the, like, hey, talking about people with STDs, like talking crap about them just like simply on that basis is not cool, because it comes with a lot of like social cost. Because that's what bullies will do. They'll be like, oh, so you're defending them, you must also have something. And like, so what if you did? Who cares? Like, is that bully trying to sleep with you? Like, what business is it of theirs if you do or don't have something? Good morning. Hello. You got your treat. But what about this healer? Oh, here we go. Predictive programming. Symbols, storylines, and headlines work together, training the collective mind to normalize what once seemed unthinkable. By the time it happens, the public is primed to accept it without question. It's kind of making me think of the release of the files and such, and any events around that, because it's not necessarily that they're all working together in this like coordinated dance. It's just, it's so overwhelming, it knocks out your like critical thinking skills. It doesn't have that like super villainy vibe that you'd have in like a movie or something that's people were thinking ahead instead of like responding in the moment. But it came out sideways, so it, have they lost control of the narrative? That would be the need for the dirty offer. Because that, again, perception, narratives require perception if they're not going to be based in fact. And people are often very lazy and don't want to go out of their way to discover context. So they just work with whatever's provided to them at face value. And sometimes, yeah, that's a comment on their personality and whatnot. They also might just be burnt out, you know? Not that it's an excuse to, if something was like reputational damage or something like that, to just go along with it. But I'm just saying that's another potential cause. Oh, it just occurred to me. If reputational damage was the intent, doing something like saying this other person, sorry, I just had a light bulb, but saying this other person had an STD, that's something that carries that social cost to where other people might not want to ask about it, because it's rude, like, to be intrusive about other people's medical history. But it's also like people don't stand up for others, like, being gossiped about in that manner because of the bullying that would get transferred to them. But the light bulb that just went off was was a rumor started about a healer, whomever this change of power would be going to, that they do have an STD that whomever the change of power from actually has. And so, God forbid, somebody's actually trying to pass something on to protect the narrative, to protect the perception and things like that. And, I mean, it sounds kooky, but people will do the most desperate things if it's reputation and money and whatnot on the line, even if everything is their fault. It doesn't matter. Always partying. Shots every weekend, no time for you, party first, love later. So reckless behavior, and we all have our vices, we all have our things. If you want to go out and party, do that. Just be safe. Take an Uber. Use protection. Things like that. If you're in a monogamous relationship, keep it monogamous. Because it's another aspect of cheating that's really bothered me, is that the agreement to the relationship was monogamy, in this hypothetical, right? And if that person cheats on you and then doesn't come clean, you're now in a relationship without your consent. Because it's not without your consent, only if you know about it, that the logic will get twisted in that manner, what you don't know doesn't hurt you. Yes, it does. Especially if someone's being reckless and not using protection, things like that. We all have things to work through. And if you're not ready to be in a monogamous relationship, or you don't want to be in a monogamous relationship, don't. Deal with your stuff. Obsessive lover. God, that looks like the chick from the... Was it a girl in the Grudge? Grudge. I think it was. Clingy and controlling. Can't let you go. Karmic and chaotic. And into you. Good chemistry, great vibes, and pure intentions, but is in reverse. Don't like that. Situationship? This now feels like a third energy. whomever this doesn't feel like a boss daddy to me, so I'm just going to call them Saturn. Saturn, whoever that represents, was interested in whoever the healer is, but that's unrequited. Because there's a lot of drama. But just because that was unrequited doesn't mean they're not out partying, you know? But that does something to this narrative. Were they like saying that they were together? Or placing bets? Ew. This one. I want to know more. What's the deal with this situationship or situationships? Because this almost doesn't feel like an individual. It feels like a vice. Ignoring in reverse. Left unread, avoiding messages, giving the silent treatment. Situationship that refuses to be ignored. Uh-oh. Somebody wasn't using protection. STDs might not be the only concern. Marrying for money. Yeah. That might be a surprise bundle of joy. Copycat. In reverse, though. Steals your ideas, duplicates your style, feeds off your creativity. They're like a pale comparison to the healer. Like they'll never be them. Can't replace the healer, but the healer was never an option. Like that's the vibe that I'm getting. And I think that came up in the last reading too. It's like this breadcrumb trail. So what's this? The narrative. What's the narrative? Because that feels like a little bit of a, was it a red herring that affects Saturn and not the healer. Like it's not necessary for the core understanding. Because, I mean, we all like to think of ourselves as the protagonist. Probably especially in tarot readings where we can get really black and white. But you could be in the Saturn role, you know, and if you're making choices that threaten the health of yourself, of your partner, maybe stop doing that. Just a thought. Transformation in reverse. That the healer isn't transformed? Because, you know, we talk about the progression of healing journeys and whatnot, and the butterfly is used often in just those descriptions. That the healer's a phony? Something? These sound bitter, is really what I'm getting, like, I wonder, the transition of power, is the healer getting involved with somebody that they are interested in? Because that's not really a transition of power, but going, like, on the, like, separation of church and state metaphor, Maybe the healer has gone through the like whole chrysalis butterfly stage and whatnot, and the type of partner that they may have gone for before is not who they're going for now. And this very rigid Saturn energy might be interpreting flexibility as a falsehood. Because I've noticed that with a lot of like black and white thinking, that there's a sort of expectation that like once you are a way, that's the way you are forever. Like there's no room for personal growth, for evolution and whatnot. But yet that image, that projection of the healer, that'll be put out when something like this happens with like partying too much, drinking too much, sleeping around too much, or like in an inappropriate way, like if you're cheating on your partner, something like that. Because like you do you. But when something that like taboo happens to the Saturn energy, they'll like default to this like, I'm healed, I found Jesus, like something like that. Car drama. Uh-oh. Repo nightmares, always asking for a ride, too broke to fix it, but it's in reverse. I don't quite get that. I need another one. Because if they're struggling with drinking, there might be some car stuff, and hopefully nobody gets in an accident or anything like that. We've got wasting time, stuck, no changes, limited, fake flexing, acts rich, flosses money. Flosses money. I'll have to look that up on Urban Dictionary later and then schedule a chiropractor appointment because I'm ancient. Acts fancy, shows off, etc. Crying over you, still not over it. Watching your posts, pretending they're fine. So something about the car, they're not making any progress, or they're not making any progress in their own transformation. The narrative is that they're doing the work, they're doing the therapy, you know, they're using the words of the healer, but they're not actually going through the transformation. It's superficial, it's a red herring. Feels almost like a second life, which, if you're struggling with substance issues and not being honest about it, it can become that. It can become this schism. Another one. So what about this transformation? Fake flexing. Because that would be the like... the I Found Jesus stuff, or even like going through a 12-step program. Because the problem I have with that, especially if it's being used as like the one and only thing, which I understand not everybody has the budget for therapy and things like that. But it can become a little bit of an echo chamber where the underlying issue isn't being looked at, because so much of substance use issues come from trauma. It's a way to build a wall in between yourself and those experiences. And sometimes some programs will treat the substance use itself as a root cause, and that's not always the case. I really like having a dynamic approach, if at all possible, budgets and such notwithstanding. But if you can have that, the support group, the trusted therapist, and then, the wild card, whether it's some sort of spiritual practice, a group hobby, or something like that, or even an individual hobby, just something else. But we've got travel in reverse. And then also that car drama. So maybe someone is dealing with not having access to their own transportation. So that can feel like a lot of erosion of independence, which can then, if these things are not being dealt with in a healthy manner and just kind of at that top level, they can manifest in kind of unusual ways. Well, not even unusual, but uncomfortable ways. Like, if work is the only place where you feel like you have power in your life, you become a tyrant. Something like that. Whatever other areas, if you are hanging out with your buddies at the exclusion of repairing things with your partner, things like that. Just when things get out of balance, and the problems will become like really concentrated in whatever area becomes an outlet until it starts to spread like a wildfire. Which maybe something like that happened with this group, this narrative. So what did this say? So this was like trying to paint the healer in a certain light to prevent whatever this change of power represents. But reality doesn't match up. Like, they don't actually have this STD. Maybe they don't drink, something like that. They don't even partake in whatever this vice is. And especially, like, I've had people make up fake relationships that we were in together. Like, they pulled my pictures off of social media and stuff like that. And it was like the strangest thing figuring it out. Because that's not somebody that wants their actions seen. But, like, I don't know, like, what are you doing? Faking a relationship? Like, you're gonna get caught eventually because it's a real person. This was well before AI. But so what's going on with this group? Because they have a role in this. What is it? Or what's the present state of the group? Because around every abuser is like a herd of enablers. Not always a herd, but if we're going with that like cult scale, it's probably more than one person, more than one enabler. And enablers don't necessarily have to be like a knowing party. It could be just back to what I was talking about, that people can be kind of lazy. And this Saturn person, whatever, let's say they're cognitively empathetic. You know, there are multiple types of empathy. Um, they have a lot of knowledge on emotions, human behaviors, things like that. And so, kind of hedging their bets on the way people are likely to act rather than like having to keep up with like that web of lies than what we were talking about in previous ones, previous readings. Because that seems like it would be more effective. Because how would you remember? That's such an easy way to get caught. Nature spirits in reverse. I think this was on the Ten of Cups card in the last reading. The tree had a face. And that was also in reverse. They're not watching anymore. They're not paying attention anymore. Maybe the group has caught on to whatever's going on with this person. Like, say it started out like calculated and precise and whatnot, but now it's all kind of fallen apart because of addiction issues. Things have spiraled out of control. And then people will default back to that kind of lazy behavior. You know, maybe they didn't go back to the healer or anything and tell them anything. Maybe they just carried on with their lives like, oh, nope, I'm not getting involved with this. Which on one hand, I understand. You know, we're all facing a lot in the world right now. We only have so much bandwidth. But how's that healer supposed to find out and, like, protect themselves? I don't know. Have to be, like, finding out by accident. What about these nature spirits, the group? Nope, thought about it. What about the group? Digital ID in reverse. I feel like I've been hearing a lot about digital ID recently. Maybe who's maintaining the data or the data centers? I'm not sure. A digital ID links your movements, transactions, and history into a single trackable profile. The more your identity is centralized, the more vulnerable you are to being switched off. But it's in reverse. Is this not a group of people? Is this one people pretending to be lots of people? If you've seen that, like, what is it, Sweet Bobby on Netflix? This follows a similar idea, like the multiple people. And it was really just so outlandish. And I think it went on for like 8 years, something like that. It's like 8-10 years. But the whole like web of lies started to come crashing down when the main woman, I think her name was Bobby, she confronted somebody involved, like just showed up randomly at their house, and then that person was like, "Who are you?" And she was like, "Wait, what?" She's like, "We've been dating for the past like 8 years. What are you talking about?" And yeah, it got really, really out of hand. Tell me more. Did they get that desperate to prevent this change of power? Like constructing personas, like catfishing? Catfishing came up too in that last reading. Dodging bullets, blocking bad energy, escaping toxic people. Haters can't touch you, but it's in reverse. And hands. So 2 cards with hands. What's that mean? Palmistry? You need to take up some palmistry? I don't know. But this person is not dodging bullets. Have they been found out? Thoughts. So the example that I just brought up, the web of lies came crashing down when this transitioned from in the digital world to the real world, when it became her confronting the guy at the door by surprise. So maybe something they were trying to do to convince everybody that this narrative about the healer was true required some sort of in-person action, or they took an in-person action they didn't need to take and it just like blew everything wide open. Let me know when this Netflix documentary comes out. I want to know how this all fits together, because I think this is the 4th reading in this chain of readings. It kind of started at the year of the fire horse, like the eclipse. Maybe that'll be the, I don't know, the time frame that these all end up fitting in is the eclipse points. Inside scoop. It's Netflix. A closer look, nosy, up in your business. Somebody investigating something. Or people in the group have caught on. And now they're like comparing notes or something. Like, well, they said this, that, and the other about the healer, but they don't even drink. And then maybe they were seen with this marrying for money person. Because, I mean, if you have a surprise bundle of joy, you're going to be inevitably spending more time together. At least you would think. So maybe they were seen out, I don't know, at a store? What else? I'm so intrigued as to, like, the 2 hands cards. Well, quiet all of a sudden, huh? Or why? We don't want the inside scoop to be seen. I would like to see the inside scoop. Let's try freshening that up. There we go. Uninterested, but it's in reverse. is the scoop that they were actually like interested in the healer? Like back to where we were talking about that earlier? And they didn't take the non-interest well? That's such a feature in... Yeah, that might be it. But that's such a feature in so many of these, like, elaborate harassment type stories. Is it'll start from just a simple perceived slight, because people have autonomy. They're under no obligation to date anybody ever if they don't want to. And this person has a grudge about it. And there was that other card that looked like it was from the grudge. What's the grudge about? Stalker. Lurking online, still checking your stories, obsession never left. So, if you're in that sort of situation, it's tricky because, as we've seen on many Netflix documentaries and with the files and things like that, like, how many times do women have to come forward before you're going to believe us? Remains to be seen. But that's a real danger, stalking, because it raises the risk of unaliving by 7-fold, something like that. And that's a stat I got from Laura Richards. Really interesting work that she has. Covers a lot of true crime. And some cases that they don't always get the same publicity as others. You know, some not so well heard of things. But what is this making me think of? Oh, I heard an example today on another tarot reader's video of... They were talking about manifestation, and that if, like, you can't expect to only manifest good things. Sometimes you manifest bad things, and the example that was used was stalking. What a harmful example. That's victim blaming with wearing a suit that's made up of spiritual bypassing. You know, because it follows that, like, everything is preordained, which is not something that I believe. You know, I don't believe in omni-qualities, and I do believe in free will. So somebody stalking you is them subjecting you to their free will. That's not something you're manifesting. That's not something you're magnetizing. That is all on them. That, like, I cannot emphasize that enough, how harmful that narrative is, because people living with trauma sometimes end up going to therapy to, like, not be crazy anymore, just for the therapist to inform you that you're actually being abused. That's how deep some of this programming runs. That, man, people, like, just don't consider the implications of the things that they say. And so maybe that's, like, there's a stark difference between the people involved in this reading. The healer and whomever is the Saturn person. Because the Saturn person would use that real black and white logic of, like, oh, well, we're in samsara, where everything that happens in our life was predetermined before we were born into this life. Whereas the healer might take a more dynamic approach of, it might be a little bit more chaotic, but you actually get to take personal accountability in a world with free will. Because if everything's preordained, well, you're just experiencing, you're not learning anything. It was already set. The logic starts to fall apart. And that kind of goes back to the culty vibes of unquestionable leaders, rigid belief systems. Yeah, that's a good delineation on those things. Anything we need to know about this stalker, though? And unfortunately, I don't really have the best advice for when it comes to stalkers. I had one of those when I was younger. And man, people do not take that seriously. Moving in reverse and romantic love affair. SEX fix, secret lover, passion over loyalty. So not moving. The stalker's stuck in place. Which, I mean, if they're having transportation issues, yeah, that makes sense. If you do have legitimate concerns over being stalked, might see if like a local domestic violence organization might be able to help you, because they're going to understand the intricacies of it's not that simple of just go talk to the authorities. Sometimes that makes things worse. You know? It's like when people say, like, well, if I was there, I would have called the police on him and whatnot. Are you going to be there when they leave? You're agitating this person and then leaving the victim with them behind closed doors. The spirit is there. Yes, I understand that. But sometimes that can make things worse. Like, it sucks that we can't depend on the system that we're supposed to be able to depend on. And if they want us to depend on them, give us something dependable. Damn. Don't blame us for walking away from these systems when they're not helping us. Well, we've got Intermission and Jimmy by Tool. And the reason I include the intermission on this card is just because that, what is this? Is this on Enema? I think. Pretty sure it's on that album. But that intermission is so good. Or I mean the transition from the intermission to the song Jimmy. It just, I don't know. It really comes out of nowhere. It's really surprising. Very juxtaposed. And it's kind of like parabole and parabola. I get super irritated when whatever app I'm using, I think I'm on Quobuzz now because I don't have Spotify anymore. But if there's a break in between those two songs, it messes it up. Like, it's gotta be no breaks in between those two songs for the full effect. And, you know, those Tool albums, that'll give you a good hour and a half break, you know, from the world. So maybe just putting on an album, kind of woo-saw a little bit. If you feel unsafe, work within the confines of your situation, because I know that's not ideal to say. I wish I had a better answer of, like, it's so simple to go report it to the appropriate people and you'd be helped every time. But as we're seeing from those files, that's not always the case. And hopefully there will be meaningful changes in the future. But overall, I hope this helps. I hope you stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.